call is from a federal prison.
I was raised to believe that the American dream was about pursuing happiness. As much as I hate to admit it, my happiness occasionally counted on the freedom to consume various substances. But it was the legal substances that changed my life forever. Now I question the motives that go into creating our modern drug laws, and the people who have been elected to protect us have become some of the people I fear the most.
And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
We have allowed the government to declare a war on drugs because the majority of Americans haven't known any better. And they haven't really understood that all of this is a massive deception. It's a massive profit scheme.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
They can't even keep drugs out of the prison system. You know, they have guys in prison that ODs and things of that nature, even in the home.
What's happening here in America is that our government is inadvertently supplying the hard drugs to the people in this country. Then they're putting the people who use them in this country in jail.
Fixated on terror, most Americans have forgotten they are fighting another war.
Watch a nigga say, sew an eyeball back to your mama's sunny day, crying.
But from its inception, the drug war has become the longest, most costly and destructive war in American history.
The drug war is a perfect continuing example of why we will never win the war on terrorism. Because it captures the ineffectiveness of the U.S. government, and it captures the fact that it's being used against poor people and not against the people who benefit most from drugs, which are the bankers that launder the money.
We don't send nicotine addicts to jail, and we don't send alcoholics to jail. We shouldn't send drug addicts to jail.
Oh my God, do you mean they'll legalize marijuana and you can buy heroin at 7-Eleven?
People have to realize that most of our history, we didn't have federal laws against the use of drugs.
$50 billion a year at the local, state, national level, clogging our courts year after year.
I mean, people fighting the drug war need to articulate that what we're after is not blanket legalization, but decriminalization.
Why in the world do we have millions of innocent young people wasting away in prison when the big people who are committing these huge, atrocious crimes are getting away every day?
My own personal opinion, I think the jail cell is better than the rehab.
This year is the 30th anniversary of the Drug Enforcement Agency. It was created by Richard Nixon in 1973, and Richard Nixon is really the creator of this drug war from 1971.
With every passing day of this drug war, the battle line seems to be getting harder and harder to see. And yet it's almost impossible to believe that the same rules apply to everyone.
Well, a lot of us are very uncomfortable with this notion of a war on drugs. So what we attempted to do was articulate a very different concept, which was viewing the drug issue as a cancer affecting American communities.
You used the wrong word. You said war. If this was a war, we would have solved the war and won the war. This is the greatest country in the world. When we go to win a war, we win it.
We got more drugs today than we did 10 years ago, and that's got to tell you that there is something bigger that's not being shown.
In 1972, when Richard Nixon started the war on drugs, the federal budget allocation was $101 million. Going into fiscal year 2000, the federal budget allocation was $20 billion. Yet there were more drugs in the country in 2000. They were of better quality and they were less expensive than they were in 1972. What's wrong with that picture?
We arrested 14 people targeting high schools selling heroin.
We almost totally eliminated the production of coca.
The drug warriors love to talk about illegal drugs, but what drives the motives to legalize certain harmful and equally addictive substances?
Money. Money controls this whole movement. You have a group called the Partnership for a Drug-Free America. Well, first of all, of course, we don't have a drug-free America, never have, never will. But who are the funders? Who are the main funders, source of funding for the Partnership for a Drug-Free America? Of all things, the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry. They are drugs. They are mind-altering, sometimes addicting drug-free America indeed. But why do they do that? They spend huge money to reinforce the distinction between legal drugs on the one hand and illegal drugs on the other.
I had lost 2 family members and a best friend in a very short span of time to alcohol, cigarettes, and legal prescription drugs. So fearing that I could be next due to my own struggle with addiction, I wanted to find out why the drug war seemed to be such a huge failure. When Nixon started the drug war, I was far too young to understand its implications. Living in white... If the DEA decided to crack down on all pot smokers and forced everyone to take a piss test, enforcing this law would require building prison walls around almost every city in America.
I just see such a corollary between the war on drugs and prohibition of alcohol. We tried the prohibition of alcohol, and I don't think anybody in this country wants to return to that. And yet alcohol is unbelievably destructive for a small percentage of people who imbibe.
Prohibition was an attempt by ideologues, similar to the ideologues that we have today, to impose their moral values on the rest of the country. And what they discovered was that it creates crime waves.
My name is T. Rogers. I am the CEO of Sidewalk University and the founder of SELF, Survival Education for Life and Family. I also helped start the Bloods on the West Coast.
7th Street, Parkside Rider, acting to the gun, Parkside Rider, Harlem Killer, fuck crap, dub day anyway.
Get your bottom of my face, huh?
No camera, you don't want no camera? No camera time?
Blood used to mean my brother.
Exactly. From the
Vietnam War.
Being a drug dealer doesn't mean that you are a gang member. And being a gang member doesn't mean that you're a drug dealer. But the war on drugs in itself, in essence, it gives you the power to sell drugs in a particular neighborhood.
Drugs come from poverty, which inspires crime, which inspires a loss of confidence, a loss of pride.
Instead of war on poverty, you've got a war on drugs, so the police can bother me.
The administration had a war on poverty, and that seemed to dissipate. It seems to disappear at all. I mean, it was gone. And then all of a sudden, up popped this thing called war on drugs.
After getting out of the mental hospital, my brother was moved to a halfway house deep in the ghetto. Here,
like a big Samsonite suitcase. You could put 100 keys just about in one of those, or maybe 2 of them. So that's what we normally cook every night, like 100 kilos.
Rick shares some good down-home cooking tips about rocking it up.
Well, the way we did it is I basically was a chef. You know, I did all the stirring. I would tell the guys to mix. Like one guy, he would be standing there, and I would tell him, add more baking soda, pour more water, you know, that type of situation. So it was more, it was like an assembly line.
I know this is nothing to joke about, but Rick is your all-American opportunist. And as the media told us, crack was now the big new opportunity.
You know, we had houses where you basically would go up to the window and it would be served right out the window, kind of like the way McDonald's does it, I guess. Because we had houses in so many different locations. Basically, you know, I wanted a location. I wanted it to be convenient for the people, you know, where they wouldn't have to drive for. It was kind of like marketing, I guess you would say.
The gangs evolved, and the gangs were a great business venture. They're basically marketing tools. That's really what they were. And they were quietly promoted behind the scenes. They got a lot of money. They got a lot of power. They fought for drug turf.
Everyone's working for somebody else right now, legally or illegally.
In order to film people selling and using drugs, we would have to go undercover. So we met up with an old friend of mine who was living very close to the most infamous spot in all of Los Angeles.
Yeah, put that one back in your like funny little case I made you.
All right, this is San Julian right here. This is fucking like, this is the spot, dude. Damn. I walk down San Julian, we will get all that. Dude, you meant all that is fucking, this is Tent City right here. Damn. This is San Pedro right here, which is like San Pedro, Grand, all this shit. This is just nothing but drugs. This is considered a neutral territory to gangs, like all different gangs, Bloods, Crips.
So should we just look for a place to park?
No. Yeah, but you should put that camera down.
My friend Mac Lindsay agreed to pose as a homeless guy and film people smoking crack in Skid Row.
Dude, if these people knew what we were doing, we would be fucking dead.
Yeah.
I mean dead, not even like beat up, we'd be dead.
One Thanksgiving, my brother came home from a halfway house. My aunts, my uncles, my young rich cousins were all there. No one could have been prepared for the moment Kurt pulled out a crack pipe at the dinner table and started smoking rock during the pre-meal prayer.
There's a thing called a bell. You get your bell rung. That's when you hit the pipe and you hold it. And you hold it for so long that something inside of your head, it rings.
After the first hit, you go on that's the highest you're gonna really get. That is the highest you're gonna get.
They call ringing a bell? Is that somebody else said? Did you say that?
After that, you have an increased appetite for cocaine. And you want more, and you want more, and you want more. And you tell yourself, I'll just take $10 or $5 and buy me a little hit to sustain myself, to hold myself off. But after you get that little hit, you want more, and you want more, and you want more. Then that's called chasing the rock.
Drugs can obviously cause horrible addictions, but the drug war creates black markets, creating an even more dangerous addiction for money.
Well, and I became addicted to the money and also the power, too, I believe. You know, to be in charge and to have people look up to you and talk highly of you.
Big names like Freeway Rick going down. People actually want to be like him because they don't think about drugs, they just think about the money.
But what about those people whose lives are still affected by the Los Angeles crack epidemic?
Someone that wants to get in a program, someone that wants to get away from this lifestyle, easily can do it. Easily can do it. I mean, if they can just overcome the addiction.
Many people in Washington will tell you that the crack epidemic ended in the late 90s. But according to Sergeant Lou Daigle of the Los Angeles Police Department, crack sales are stronger than ever.
Basically on San Julian, you can come and everyone's selling. I mean, everyone will either act as a hook for you and bring you to a buyer. A lot of the buys go on intense. We've even had intelligence that gangsters will come, gangbangers will. I mean, basically every gangbanger comes down here to make money.
Right.
Okay, they come down from the inner city, they come down from East LA, they come down from everywhere, all the different rival gangs, and very rarely actually is there a shooting between gang members.
Although Freeway Rick remains locked up, many people still blame him for crack's easy availability.
One time, I went over to this lady's house to drop her off some drugs, and it was the look that the little boy...
Throughout the South and probably in the Midwest, it's got a large church-going population. It's got a very tight-knit community of white people, and it's got a small outside community that's not even really a community of marginalized black and brown people.
I'm kind of the chief redneck out here because I am kind of prejudiced, and I admit it, and everybody is. I'm not unique. I am unique in that I understand who I am, and attempt to control that, which Christians are supposed to do. But any guy that puts his pants on one leg at a time and says he's not prejudiced, I say, come with me and I'll take you someplace and show you some people that you will be scared on your first impression.
Civil rights attorney Jeff Blackburn witnessed how the lure of lucrative drug war funding enticed an entire police force to make illegal arrests.
All of a sudden, overnight, there was this massive roundup, well publicized, put all over the TV stations, where 1/10 of the town's black population was escorted in handcuffs to jail. We were told that this was the most massive rural drug conspiracy ever uncovered in West Texas, that it was due to the sterling police work of an individual cop named Tom Coleman, who is a hero. The Tulia newspaper ran, not an editorial, I'm sorry, it was a news story that was headlined, "Tulia Streets Cleared of Garbage."
When all the major media sources, including 60 Minutes, covered the Tulia story, they told of a lone redneck cop by the name of Tom Coleman who hated black people. But who was Tom Coleman working for? When you follow the trail of money, he was merely a pawn of a law enforcement policy that profits from making large arrests.
So there was this thunderclap arrest and sweep of the black community. It landed 46 people in jail, nearly all of whom were black. Then, of course, they quickly started getting processed through the system with court-appointed lawyers, with all-white jurors, and we began to get sentences like 99, 75, 320 years. Out of control, over the top, Texas, typical small-town sentences for drug dealers.
Yeah, I sat in jail for 5 months before my lawyer came to see me. He told me, he said, only thing you can do for me, give me 25 to 99.
In the olden days, you had legal lynching. This was legal lynching on a whole new level. This was ethnic cleansing combined with the need to get grant money.
The problem in Tulia, and the problem with most of the task forces in the state of Texas, they're created as an entity, as a corporation that more or less stands alone. It's not in the chain of command of DPS or any state agency.
It's tempting to think of Tulia as just some rural, weird remnant of the distant Deep South past. The truth is, Tulia is the cutting edge of modern drug law enforcement.
And you got this task force out here operating like a pit bulldog or a Rottweiler that's supposed to be on kind of a leash, but it's running all over town trying to find any kid it can to bite.
Yeah, I know I was singled out because I was black, black guy, and the Spanish and the black, we in big, big trouble.
Sergeant Lou Daigle receives a call about a naked guy walking into a restaurant and putting ice up his butt.
311 man is a man with no clothes on or exposing himself.
If the government really wanted to stop drugs from coming into California or into the United States, it could be stopped. Pretty bad. Is over there naked?
The name Sherm comes from people dipping Sherman cigarettes into vials of PCP.
It bothers me to no end that so many young people are on Sherm now.
Hey, Sherm was one of the worst drugs that I ever seen in my life. Saying somebody that used Sherm, whoa.
Your mamas will call your daddies when they call my daddy. I'll press him 1,000,000 times and color me. Mama, we black or white, color him blind. Money won't eat money. I'll sue, or get up a zip. Mama said, wash him hours later after he's
I've seen guys get butt naked and run down the street.
Butt naked and wallow in the dirt and the mud.
I've seen a guy get asshole naked. I seen a guy get asshole naked in the rain and hump on the ground like he was with a woman off of PCP. That about a bitch.
Church, well, pimp, a whore, backwards, sis or slapper. Hold your asses, kids. Kids kill eggs on drugs, kids. Pop a firecracker, crackers. If you're Halloween,
We're gonna go ahead and pick you up and we're gonna put you on our gurney, okay?
Okay, we're gonna say journeys to grannies, Jeezy's, easy.
All right.
Watch the please me, clean up my mama's whores.
So I'm gonna lift you up and put you on my gurney, all right? Just chill out.
Journeys with gods or devils with Jesus is as your mama said titties gotta squeeze they self. Excuse t-shirts, they won't walk. Mama, I'm scared to wash my back. I got beat too much.
He's in custody right now for certainly under the influence of PCP, certainly for the vandalism. He's also probably for ADW against a police officer because he was throwing glass at the police officers. Once again, completely incoherent as drug-induced crime, really.
They going up like Jefferson, Mama, you're Sunny girls prayed for God. We'll walk them for 5 minutes. Ears and titties.
When we came in, that was towards the reason over for the ice. He was trying to cool himself off.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, he was here naked.
I heard he was putting ice down up his butt and doing all kinds of stuff.
All around him and just started throwing everything around.
Yeah. In downtown, the Baltimore kids
He got voted in
No sane person will tell you that drugs like PCP or crystal meth should be made available to the public. But how do you stop things that people can cook up on their own?
People have learned that they can cook up drugs, and so they're experimenting now more. And I believe we will have a whole menu of new drugs. And these drugs will not be regulated because the government has driven drugs underground.
We've told kids that marijuana is just as dangerous as methamphetamine, and kids have tried marijuana, and they recognize that it's not a dangerous drug. And then they go and try methamphetamine, and, now we're back to kids and their understanding of these things. And, so many of them put methamphetamine then in the same category. Gee, if the government's lying to me about marijuana, they must be lying to me about methamphetamine also.
It's a ploy. Well, this drug money funds terror. It's a ploy.
Ploy.
A manipulation.
Ploy.
Drug money funds terror. I mean, why should I believe that?
Because it's a fact.
A fact.
F-A-C-T, fact.
So you're saying that I should believe it because it's true. That's your argument.
It is true.
Since 9/11, the only thing that's really changed around here in my neighborhood are the attitudes of the police. The gangs are now the new terrorists.
And how tough security's gotten since 9/11, it's really how the drugs coming into the United States now. How? I mean, I don't have an airplane, I don't have a car that's gonna make it with California plates to Mexico and back to Colombia. I can't even drive to Colombia.
Yeah, so it gotta be flown.
I don't have a boat.
It gotta be flown or shipped.
There's a great line in the movie Boys in the Hood where Larry Fishburne is saying, hey man, we don't grow it, we don't own any airplanes, we don't have any laboratories. How does it get here? Why does it get here? And that's a very good common sense approach that intuitively the people in South Central understood, that there was something much bigger than them that was moving the whole drug issue and the drug war.
My parents were staunch Republicans. Back in the 80s, the big concern was not terrorism, it was communism. The Iran-Contra affair was one of the biggest political scandals in U.S. history. Members of the Reagan administration, headed by Oliver North, engaged in the sale of arms to Iran. The proceeds from these illegal deals were being used to fund the Contras, a right-wing guerrilla group that Reagan referred to as his freedom fighters. The Contras were fighting the Soviet-backed Sandinistas for the domination of Nicaragua.
The Iran-Contra is very important in history. We have to remember the fact that Iran-Contra its mandate was to investigate the sales of missiles to Iran.
Former DEA agent Celerino Castillo not only fought in the international effort of the American drug war, he also had the rare opportunity of carrying a camera and recording some of the regrettable actions of the DEA and CIA while they supported President Reagan and Oliver North's Contra movement.
George Bush Sr. came to Guatemala on January 13, 1986. And he approached me and asked me what I did there at the U.S. Embassy, what my job description was. And I told him I was a DEA agent working international narcotics investigations. And I told him, look, you know, we have gathered intelligence that the Contras are involved in drug trafficking.
For me, because I'd been out alone for 18 years and didn't really know that kind of support was there for me either. The average person in South Central Los Angeles did not know anything about really how the CIA worked. They had an intuitive sense.
If you have a private network run by George Bush and Ollie North, not the CIA, you won't find the records in the CIA. They're not there. They're in these privatized intelligence agencies. Will you pursue that? Will you pursue Ollie North and George Bush and the massive documentation? All these gentlemen, like this gentleman here, the co-defendant of Ricky Ross.
They needed the money to finance the war in Nicaragua. They had the link. We know that from records now that they sent Blandon, who was a CIA operative, to school for marketing the product, which we now know is cocaine.
Me and Ricky Ross is waiting to get sentenced Tuesday. And what a judge gonna say to us come Tuesday?
May I just say that the question which was asked of us by the judge was Ricky Ross ever an agent or a contract employee?
I already knew that from the beginning of dealing with Danilo Blandon that he was sending supplies and things of that nature, computers and guns to Nicaragua to fight a war.
Ricky had already served a 5.5-year sentence for dealing crack, but was now given a second 20-year sentence after being set up by his former partner Blandon, while Oliver North walked away as a hero, wealthy and free to try his hand at politics.
Oliver North was being promoted by the Christian Coalition, and to them he was the last white hope that they were going to have for a right-wing Christian to run for U.S. Senate in Virginia.
During the 1986 Kerry Commission, Oliver North's crimes were exposed to the American public, and yet today Oliver North is not only a free man, he has his own show on the Fox News network.
It's amazing that Oliver North has his own TV show, and hopefully when I get out, I plan on having my own.
How does a federal agency like the CIA exert control over local law enforcement agencies?
The way it's done, which I saw firsthand at LAPD, there are networks called the Narcotics Intelligence Network, or now it's called Clearinghouse, where agencies who are doing a drug case don't step on each other's toes.
Every time the police go invade us, I know Rick used to get calls and say, move out, they coming.
We actually saw that here in 1986 with major task force investigations of Freeway Ricky Ross. They had search warrants for 19 locations that were prepared one night, and by the time they got there the next morning, all 16 locations had been cleared out. And that means that obviously there was a leak. That's the way the CIA protects its share of the drug trade.
Just one night, I got a tip from Danilo not to go over, and just so happened to be the night that they raided.
Crack use spread like wildfire in the early 1980s. And in Los Angeles, a drug dealer known as Freeway Ricky Ross was in the middle of it. Prosecutors called Ross the Walmart of crack. He made millions in the early 80s dealing to...
That he could have a free run with drugs into America, provided that he allowed us to support the Contras from Panama. That was a straight-up deal.
Now, I don't understand why the government didn't use Freeway Rick the way they used him. Set him up to go buy it from the big man and bust the big man. They know he ain't the big man. Somebody's bringing it to him.
Yeah, nobody's.
So why they didn't reverse it?
They always take you almost
to make it seem like he's the man.
They never.
But somebody's just bringing it to him.
Who is the real drug lord?
What do you say to like conspiracy theorists? Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the book called Dark Alliance, written about the CIA bringing in cocaine into South Central LA, the whole Ricky Ross story.
Well, I've been working with the CIA for years. I take great pride in what they do. They're very disciplined people of great courage. There aren't many of them. It's a very small agency. They're out there in the global context trying to protect the American people. So I think they deserve to be treated with respect. But the notion that they're smuggling drugs into America is just absurd.
I think Ricky Ross simply didn't invest enough money in bribing local authorities. Had he invested in a protection insurance policy at the state and local level through legal fronts, I mean, there are all kinds of lawyers that are willing to sell their souls and happy to take their money and then channel it into bribes. So basically, I think Ricky Ross didn't realize that he could become a pawn in the war on drugs.
Are you aware of whether or not narcotics proceeds at some time may or may not have supported Contra efforts?
Yes, sir. Narcotics proceeds were used to shore up the Contra effort.
Okay. Did you personally play a role in some of the transfer of that money?
Yes, I did.
6 months after CIA Director John Deutsch came to Locke High School, the residents of Watts were hardly surprised that the CIA found itself innocent of all drug-dealing charges. Today, Ricky Ross remains in prison as the sole perpetrator of America's biggest drug war scandal.
And this was an off-the-books operation. It was an operation that was specifically forbidden by the U.S. Congress, and drugs were used, together with Saudi Arabian contributions, also off the books. Drugs were used by the CIA to carry out a covert action that had been forbidden by Congress.
When Bush Sr. lost the election to Bill Clinton, everyone felt as if a new day were born in America. Now the peaceful liberals would rule, and the tired, corrupt Iran-Contra Reagan crew would be gone for good. Nick and Norm were brought to us by the Office of National Drug Control Policy, also known as the Office of the Drug Czar. Under Bill Clinton, the office was headed up by four-star General Drug Czar Barry McCaffrey.
Clinton had a drug czar by the name of Barry McCaffrey. And what he did, he was the evil one. Now, Clinton was the good one. Everybody loved Clinton. He played the sax, and, he said he didn't inhale, and, he got the BJ from the broad and everything, and everybody, he was
Black baby.
Yeah, Clinton was the man.
Less than a mile away from T's place, former President Clinton made an appearance to promote his new book. So many adoring fans showed up that Clinton was not able to sign everyone's copy.
Problem coffee shops, that's why I don't understand why they can legalize this shit,
Well, what do you think about the fact that in America, they're filling up the prisons with people that just want to do drugs?
It's not right. They gotta try another different approach, like taking care of the people, who are addicted. They give them places to use the shit, and taking care of people who don't have a house to sleep. That's the way they do it here in Holland.
All right, dude.
By total coincidence, we found ourselves at the 420 bar on April 20th. Unbeknownst to me, 420 is a very significant date in the worldwide pot-smoking community.
My name is Michael Veling. I'm the owner of this bar Koen coffee shop, which means that you can drink a beer in here and you can also buy a bag of grass, if you so wish. I've had this place for 18 years, and I've never had a fight in here.
American comedian Tom Rhodes moved to Holland, where he became the Dutch equivalent of David Letterman.
Mr. Tom Rhodes.
People think that all drugs are legal there. It's not true. And actually, marijuana and hash is not legal. It's tolerated, as are mushrooms. All organic drugs are tolerated.
I don't have much to say about Dutch drug policy. Their model applied to the United States would be inappropriate, and we're not going to do it. We're not going to legalize drugs. Drugs are already decriminalized by and large in the United States.
What have they done in Holland? Well, they realize, of course, that the drugs are here to stay, and let's try to manage the problem. And they have put in a really effective harm reduction program.
In Holland, they call people junkies who do anything too much. If you drink too much, you're considered a junkie. If you smoke too much weed, you're considered a junkie. Which, when I first moved over there and I heard people go, oh, he's a junkie, I always thought they were talking about heroin.
What has happened? Well, the Minister of Health of Holland held a press conference a few years ago saying, you know something? We have only half the marijuana usage in Holland as you do in your country, both for adults and for teenagers. He said, we have succeeded in Holland in making pot boring.
Holland has 60% the drug use is that of the United States, and that's among...
One and the same.
The psychedelic drugs have been used through time in very positive ways, and they do not present a threat to anybody except the power establishment.
After getting word that my father's condition had taken a turn for the worse, I spoke with a doctor who uses hallucinogenic drugs in order to prepare terminally ill people for the inevitable transition.
In terms of the hallucinogens per se, my interest rests primarily in their potential application as a medical psychiatric treatment, and I believe that they're particularly valuable for patient populations that do not respond well to conventional treatments.
Diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, one would be hard-pressed to accuse Pam Sakuda of only wanting to get high.
The people who are waging the war on drugs have every interest in continuing to do so, because especially medicines like hallucinogens. And I think we all agree in these discussions that what they do is they allow you to change your perspective and to think outside of the box that you're closed into. And that's the last thing that this power structure wants, is for you to think outside of the box. In fact, they'd rather make your box smaller.
But here's an opportunity to have a truly religious experience, not hearing about religion, but to have that primal experience. Of course, your dad and his condition and all of his mindset, his rigidity would be highly unlikely to accept that.
The truth is, a sick person, a patient who is ill, should have the right to use anything that they can use that will help relieve their pain and suffering.
Because of my father's beliefs and the laws in Texas, I'll never know if naturally occurring drugs could have helped him through the most painful experience in his life. And in the end, like most Americans, he put his faith in Western medicine and lost his battle with cancer. My father lived an amazing life. He started with nothing and tirelessly worked his way to the top. And even though I didn't agree with his drinking, it was the way he chose to live. As far back as I can remember, my parents, like the rest of the World War II generation, all drank lots of hard liquor. Our country's psyche seems to be one fueled by alcohol, so it only makes sense that the drug war is against anything that threatens alcohol or tobacco.
When alcohol prohibition ended, it empowered a new group of entrepreneurs, the liquor industry. The tobacco industry has done a phenomenal job of jumping into the FDA and exempting its product from every single law that would have caused it to get off the shelf.
All my brothers, all them dead, my mom and dad, ain't everybody. Yeah, I'm the only one left. They was a drinker. They died with cirrhosis of the liver.
Everybody likes to sin. Don't you like to sin?
Yeah, all the time. I don't know.
Okay.
I never call that a difficult lifestyle. I just call
It depends on how much sinning you do, Pilgrim.
Ever since my friend Bill died, I had done my fair share of consuming various substances. I thought I had escaped the addictive traits of my family, but for me the hook came in the form of pain pills. Not being able to afford rehab, while searching the internet, I found a new drug treatment that breaks the addiction to opium. It seems like being addicted is punishment enough. I can't even begin to imagine having the law involved.
I mean, how many people have you known in your life now whose lives have been affected directly by the drug war?
Many people. Good people, good talented people.
It makes as much sense to me to put this gifted actor Robert Downey Jr. in jail for his cocaine problem, and regretfully he certainly seems to have one, as it would have Betty Ford in jail for her alcohol problem. It's the same thing. But if Betty Ford or Robert Downey Jr. or you or I drive a motor vehicle while impaired by whatever drug you're talking about, be it marijuana, alcohol, cocaine, or whatever, that's a crime. Bring them to court, bring them to people like me, and we will address their actions. That's an appropriate use of the criminal justice system.
The media and the drug war have a long symbiotic relationship. During the last several years, Freeway Ricky Ross's legend continued to grow. A platinum-selling rapper using the name Ricky Ross tells stories that glorify Rick's life as a drug dealer. Ricky even had his own hour-long BET special, once again proving how a war-weary country has become immune to complete government corruption. However, in late 2005, Ricky did catch a break and got his sentence reduced down to a few years.
Ricky Ross is really a good guy who took advantage of an opportunity. He was an entrepreneur, but he's at the bottom of the food chain, so he went to jail. All the guys that violated the law, that ignored congressional sanctions on Iran-Contra, they're all in power. And George Bush, a guy...
Life goes on.
Back in Sheriff Joe's jail, the daily grind goes on. And in all honesty, as much as I wanted to hate Joe Arpaio, I was glad that some of the inmates I met were not living on my street.
March time, march!
80% of the cops shot in this area were shot because people are high on drugs. So we want to give drugs to everybody. Let them all shoot the cops.
Growing up during Nixon's drug war, I can't even imagine how life would be without this drug prohibition. I often wonder who in my family might still be alive had they used naturally occurring drugs for both their medical and recreational needs. The government claims that the future of illegal drug use is heading towards synthetics, such as prescription abuse and crystal meth. This man lives in the most drug-infested area of Amsterdam.
Much crystal meth here?
No, I never heard about crystal meth. And what is it?
Speed.
Speed?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a place that has adopted a more Christian value towards organic substances that come from the earth, synthetic drugs like crystal meth are almost non-existent. Do you want your future to be this? Or to stay on a pathway that allows a greedy few to profit from the felonization of sick people?
It's a free-for-all on the street. Your kids can go and buy heroin and cocaine easier than they can get cigarettes and alcohol. So there has to be some control.
We're not going to legalize drugs. We're not going to do it. You know, we have actually done a terrific job in the United States reducing drug abuse. It's true.
No one talks about making cigarettes illegal. So they're not protecting